Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. Protests in Russia. Finally, protesters clash with police in a remote Russian town after a local activist was sentenced. Fail Alsynov was fined last year for criticizing Russia's mobilization drive for the war in Ukraine. He called it a genocide of the Bashkir people. This is all going down in the Republic of Bashkortostan. You can see from this red dotted line where this is located in the Russian Empire. It's just north of Kazakhstan. And what he was sentenced for actually has nothing to do with Ukraine. Alsynov was accused of making a racist comment in a speech to a village council meeting against gold digging. This man is a local environmental activist, and he insists his words were mistranslated from his native Bashkir language. So he was speaking in Bashkir. What he said was translated by someone into Russian, and the translation used a racial slur. In Russia, the phrase is often used to describe people from Central Asia or the Caucasus, people with darker skin colors. Alsynov said he was referring to poor people, not people with darker skin colors. The activist was last year fined for criticizing Moscow's offensive in Ukraine, saying it was not in Bashkortostan's interests. According to local media, Alsynov called Russia's mobilization drive a genocide of the Bashkir people and said Moscow's offensive was not our war. Here's the man. This is Fail. What he's saying in this video is he didn't expect to get a 4-year prison sentence for this misunderstanding of what he said in his own language, and he seems like a nice guy.
Всем, кто приехал меня поддержать, всем огромное спасибо. Я это никогда не забуду. Я свою вину не признаю. Всегда боролся за справедливость, за свой народ, за свою республику. Поэтому
This sentencing took place in a small town of only 17,000 people, and 10,000 people showed up to the courthouse to show him support. Here's the crowd outside the courthouse. So apparently Russians do know how to protest. Protesters clash with police as Russian court jails Bashkir activists. Lots of videos online. I'm not going to play them, but I'll link them down below if you want to see kind of what the rioting was looking like. And this wasn't anything major. Throwing snowballs, throwing rocks, the riot police using their batons. These were Russian National Guardsmen brought in from outside the region in order to beat up on these local Bashkortostan citizens, but this could be the beginning of something bigger. A video appeared online of a woman calling on the residents of Bashkortostan in the Special Military Operations Zone to abandon their posts in the military and return to their native land in order to protect their people.
Я призываю всех бойцов Башкирии покинуть территорию Украины и вернуться на свою родину для защиты своей земли и своего народа. Пока вы воюете за амбиции одного человека, ваш народ бьют дубинками ОМОН и Росгвардия. Возвращайтесь на защиту своей земли.
These people are trying. I'll give them respect for that. But this is the Russian Empire, subjugating the ethnic minorities across the Eurasian continent. These people still have their own ethnic identities, their own culture and language, despite Russia's best attempts to eradicate it over the last 300 or 400 years. Let's check in with the military map, and by that I mean the weather map this winter. And it's currently negative 13 degrees Celsius in Moscow. That's about 5 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's cold. 10 injured by flood of boiling water in Russia's Nizhny Novgorod. There's still plenty of videos emerging every day of utility failures cascading across Russia. Let me play just a couple of these clips for you.
Апокалипсис. И газель вскрылась в тумане.
Heating pipes across Russia continue to burst. Huge steam clouds and boiling water engulf the streets of Novosibirsk. This is a different Russian city. Let me play a little bit of this clip for you.
Улица Пархоменко, дом 49. Гейзер. Вода течет по улице. Перекресток пешеходный. Здесь плещет вода.
I'll link this down below. It goes on for another minute and a half, but none of this is being fixed this winter. The defect in Novosibirsk, it's getting worse. About 2,500 buildings in the city are now without heat. That's over 500,000 people living in these apartment buildings. The current temperature will reach negative 28 degrees Celsius or negative 18 Fahrenheit. Why? What is happening with Russia's utilities? Why the Kremlin is fiddling as Russians continue to freeze? Like many other public policy reforms in Russia, the modernization of utility networks has fallen victim to wishful thinking, corruption, and political short-termism. Successive Russian governments have tried to reform the sector at least once a decade since the fall of the Soviet Union. These efforts have all failed to reach their objectives, as did an attempt to attract private investment over the past decade. So under the Putin government, and even going back to Yeltsin, they've always had an option. What do you spend your money on? And upgrading and reinforcing their utility networks has never risen to the top of the list. It's kind of like when you were a kid and you were playing Oregon Trail and you only bought bullets, when you should have been buying maybe spare wagon wheels or spare wagon axles. Putin, especially for the last 12 or 13 years, has only been buying bullets, missiles, at the detriment of his utility network, his medical system, his schools. Putin doesn't care about the general welfare of his people. All he wants to do is expand the borders of his empire. My question is, at what temperature does vodka freeze? Vodka freezes at negative 16 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 26 degrees Celsius. It's at that point that Russians can't even drink anymore because their vodka is frozen. Perhaps we'll get some serious rioting when that occurs. Things in Russia keep blowing up and catching on fire. This was a massive fire at the Shakhtinsky polyester plant in the Rostov region. This thing looks almost as devastating as the Wildberries warehouse factory in St. Petersburg. And something inside this polyester factory caused a massive explosion. It was captured on CCTV video. I'll link it down below if you want to see a pretty big explosion, and then the subsequent fire that brought down the building. Russia lost another helicopter. An Mi-8 had to make an emergency landing on a road, and you can see from the tail section here that this thing's probably not flying anytime soon. Another helicopter bites the dust. According to military intelligence, railways in western Russia keep being sabotaged. Ukraine's intelligence services keeps releasing the videos anytime one of these railway junctions gets sabotaged. I think they're putting out these videos as an instruction manual for any ambitious Russians who oppose this war, the best thing you can do right now is go after Russia's railway network. If Russia can't ship things by rail, their whole economy, their whole country will grind to a halt. Let's now talk about US politics, and I'm sorry, but things have gotten worse here in the United States. Mitch McConnell expects the Senate to take up the Ukraine border security package next week. So I think I'll have all the details of whatever this bill is that Republicans in the Senate have been working on next Monday. I think I'll make a dedicated video talking about immigration reform and border security and what exactly the Democrats want and what the Republicans want. I'll try to be fair to both sides because I do believe that Senate Republicans are genuinely trying to get some kind of deal, and they do support Ukraine. The problem is in the House. House Speaker Johnson says no deal on the border or Ukraine aid, possible ahead of a meeting with the White House. I've been carefully watching everything Speaker Johnson has been saying and doing for months now, and there's no indication he is seriously trying to compromise or negotiate on achieving border security or military aid to Ukraine. Senate Democrats and the White House are negotiating in good faith. They do want to compromise. They do support Ukraine. And President Biden invited the leaders of Congress, these are the four members, the majority and the minority leaders, to the White House. Biden asks congressional leaders to the White House. And the second Speaker Johnson came out of this meeting in the White House, he immediately started repeating Kremlin propaganda.
We understand the necessity about Ukraine funding, and we want to say that the status quo is unacceptable. We need the commander-in-chief of this country, the President of the United States, to show strength on the world stage and not weakness. We cannot continue with the current status quo. We understand the importance of what's been needed, but when I met with President Zelensky just last month, right before Christmas, he said that the necessary ingredient is the proper weapons systems that they need. There are certain things that are needed to ensure that they can prevail. We need the questions answered about the strategy, about the end game. And
we need the questions answered about the strategy or the end game. He's trying to clean up what he's saying, but he's basically saying, I don't think Ukraine has a path to victory. Why are we going to throw money away on a losing war?
And about the accountability for the precious treasure of the American people.
And accountability of the precious treasure of the American people. We can't give Ukraine money because they're corrupt and they're going to steal our money. He's trying to phrase it very nicely, but that's basically what he's saying and what he keeps repeating. And Speaker Johnson, I actually hate this man now for what he just said. I'm going to play this clip and then I'm probably going to lose my mind.
Ability for the funds. We need to know that Ukraine would not be another Afghanistan. And you see a lot of the American people scratching their heads, having real questions about why that would continue without these appropriate answers. So I'm going to push for the...
We need to know that Ukraine is not another Afghanistan. Where do I begin? 2,400 U.S. service members lost their lives fighting in Afghanistan, following orders and doing what our political leaders told them to do. I served in the military. Speaker Johnson never served in the military. And George Bush and the Republicans led us in Afghanistan for those first 6 or 7 years, 8 years under Obama, 4 years under Trump. We're finally out. But these were U.S. service members risking their lives, following orders, trying to achieve this unrealistic objective of democratizing Afghanistan. We didn't have the support of the majority of the Afghan people. We were outsiders, we weren't Muslim, we didn't speak the language, and we just showed up in their country telling them they had to be a democracy now. We tried our best to help the people of Afghanistan, but that was our choice, and it was U.S. service members being lost. How in any way is this related to what Ukraine is doing, defending themselves from a genocidal invasion? We're not risking U.S. soldiers' lives, by just giving weapons to the Ukrainians so they can defend themselves. The US spent $2.26 trillion on the Afghan war over 20 years. Do you see this 6 in the 2.26? That's what it would take to support Ukraine this year and hold the Russians back, maybe even defeat the Russians this year. And Speaker Johnson doesn't want to do it, afraid this will be another Afghanistan. And all he can do is scribble on paper like a child. Here's a tweet from President Biden. Today I brought together congressional leaders to make clear the importance of getting Ukraine what it needs to defend itself from Putin's aggression. Speaker Johnson just put a red line through this and said, securing the border. If Speaker Johnson actually wants to secure the border, if you believe that American lives are being lost because drugs are getting across the border, gangs and criminals are getting across the border, we could secure the border right now. Speaker Johnson, as the leader of the House of Representatives, can shut down the government until Biden does whatever House Republicans want him to do. We can secure the border today. Shut down the federal government. Force this conversation from the American people of what exactly immigration reform is needed, what is needed to secure the southern border. Speaker Johnson can do this, but he's not going to do this. Will Mike Johnson get away with betraying MAGA House members with his proposed budgets? Speaker Johnson's going to cut a deal with the Democrats in the White House to fund the government. Speaker Johnson doesn't want to shut down the federal government. House GOPers seethe as Speaker Mike Johnson over his $1.66 trillion spending deal with the Democrats, calling it a total failure. Here is the quote of the day. Johnson not worried about Green threatening to oust him as Speaker of the House. That's correct. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene is threatening to recall or remove Speaker Johnson from his post for pushing through this bipartisan deal to fund the government. Here's what she says. I am a no to the Johnson-Schumer budget deal. This $1.6 trillion budget agreement does nothing to secure the border, stop the invasion, or stop the weaponized government targeting of Biden's political enemies. So much for the power of the purse. Mike Johnson urges his fellow Republicans to leave him alone on social media. This is a clown show, an absolute clown show. What's going on in the House of Representatives? People are dying. Our allies, our Democratic allies around the world are questioning us. Speaker Johnson is the one showing weakness, refusing to move forward on military aid to Ukraine. Has nothing to do with securing the border. If Speaker Johnson wanted to secure the border, he could do that by shutting down the government. But what he wants is for both of these issues to fail together. He doesn't want military aid for Ukraine, and he doesn't want to secure the border prior to the November election because politically this is what he wants to talk about. He wants to campaign on this for the next 10 months. He's willing to let Americans die from criminals getting across the border and drugs getting across the border so that it helps them in the upcoming November election. That's the honest truth. That's how politics is played in Washington, D.C. But I think Speaker Johnson's going to lose his job this month. There's going to be some crazy votes, and the House GOP majority is so razor thin, we only need 3 or 4 of these 219 now House Republicans to stab him in the back, cut a deal with the Democrats, and we can get a different Republican House Speaker for the next 9 or 10 months. It's not a big deal. Expect chaos over the next 2 weeks. Let's get to the good news for Ukraine. The German government will allocate 7 billion euros for military support for Ukraine this year, not the 4 billion euros that they had previously planned. Thank you so much, Germany. Addition, this is Ukraine's Defense Ministry thanking Germany for their latest security assistance package. Here's a list of everything included in this package. Thank you to the German people. The people of France have announced that France will deliver 40 Scalp cruise missiles. I think Ukraine has probably run out of the Storm Shadow and Scalps previously supplied. But over the next couple weeks, we're going to get some good headlines of Scalp cruise missiles taking out some high-value targets. This, of course, happened 5 months ago when the Black Sea Fleet headquarters was blown up by a Storm Shadow missile. Nobody has seen or heard from the Black Sea Fleet commander. He's definitely dead, but these are significant. This needs to happen. Ukraine needs more long-range attack options, and hopefully they are coming soon once F-16s arrive. Final couple of videos I have for you. The first one is a Ukrainian defender with his little friend.
Look. Що я тобі дам їсти? Сідай, сиди, хоч на плечі грійся. Да? Значить, я не буду ловити. Тобі ти сама знаєш, де ловити. Дивись, бо лисичка прийде, то схватить за бочок тебе. Мар'юнька. Це тепла. Що хоч, що. Мурка, сядь. Давай там. Давай там. От, мотовка. Дайте. Ай, хардатий мій дід. Такі морозки ходять. Хто їх ще прихистить, як не солдати? Да, Мурка? Ти хоч сладкий.
It's too cold to be outside for that cat. Final video I have for you is a reminder. Never forget the price of freedom. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.